So what is your perspective on movement, exercise, and how that fits in to your kind of theory and philosophy on aging?
Yeah. Well, far be it from me to say don't walk and don't move. That's step one. If you don't walk or move, then you're in big trouble when you get older. So that's a minimum. But if we're talking about what's not maximum, but optimal, we don't know that for sure, and it might be everyone's different. But in general, losing your breath is important. High intensity exercise. You don't need a lot. I just mentioned 10 minutes a few times a week. That appears to be sufficient to give you the longer term health benefits. And what's probably going on is, in part, is that we discovered, and we published this in 2018 in the journal Cell, if anyone wants to look it up, that old muscle starts to think that it doesn't have enough oxygen, even though there is enough oxygen, and it shuts itself down and doesn't make a lot of energy, and the blood vessels start to be depleted, and it's just a terrible feed-forward process after that. So by making your body hypoxic and giving it a stress, you can actually do excess oxygen or lack of oxygen, you just want to shock the system, then your body gets to reset. And one of the most popular things to do in the longevity world now is, high pressure bariatric oxygen therapy. And that, I think, is also resetting this problem that our bodies have, where they are what we call pseudo hypoxic. One of the ways that we could reset that without exercise and without high pressure oxygen chambers was using NMN, this molecule that I take. It actually boosted the body's ability to make new blood vessels. It restored the ability to measure oxygen in the muscle. And when we gave it to mice, they could run 50% further without having trained. But the good news is, the important point is that the mice that were young and exercised and got the molecule in their water ran twice as far. So it shouldn't be an excuse to pop a pill and not do anything. But there are some little changes you can make. I lift weights. I have them around my house. I'm at a standing desk, which goes up and down here. These are changes that I make that, I'm standing most of the day now. And this will really help. It builds the muscles in your leg and your butt and your back. That's important now, especially for a male my age, where I'm losing 1% muscle if I don't do something about it every year. But also the hormones. Testosterone comes from having those large muscles signal to the testes. And I've been able to correct and raise my testosterone levels just by keeping those large muscles in shape.
So much to dive into there. It's incredibly fascinating that potentially to get these longevity benefits, that you're talking just maybe 10 minutes of this kind of pulsed exercise where we're out of breath, so high intensity interval training several times a week, which is very achievable even for the busiest person out there. So I find recommendations like that really, really inspiring, because, eating less, exercising 10 minutes several times a week, a lot of people think health and wellness is the preserve of the wealthy, the middle class, all kinds of things like that. And I know there are certain things which do cost money, but it's also refreshing to know that there are lots of things that actually can be done completely free of charge. Eating less is actually saving you money, right? Than eating 3 meals a day. But, there's a couple of points around exercise which I really want to dive into. One of them is, as you say, at your age, you're losing 1% muscle mass each year. If you don't do something about it, I think that starts at the age of 30 for most of us. So when I think about that, and I think about mTOR and protein, I had this slight clash in my head whereby we know that sarcopenia, this loss of muscle mass, is a problem as one gets older. Risk of falling, problems after that, all kinds of things happen when we lose that muscle mass. So a lot of the recommendations around fighting sarcopenia are to do with, yes, resistance training, but also the amount of protein you are consuming to make sure you're limiting how much that happens. Yet at the same time, we're sort of suggesting that to increase our aging, we should be limiting our protein intake. Help us see through that apparent contradiction.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying limit protein intake at all. I get plenty of protein, just mostly from plant-based sources where there's not a lot of the branched chain amino acids. Those leucine, isoleucine, valine amino acids are the ones that activate mTOR. And so, yeah, focus on plants. You'll have enough protein to build muscle. I have no trouble building muscle. That it's a fallacy that you need to be eating, these protein shakes and meat to get stronger and to build muscle. Now, if you want to professionally build muscle, by all means, go for it. But for most of us who just want to feel good, look good, live longer, what I'm recommending doesn't affect your ability to do those things and build up muscle one bit. And it's also a fallacy that older people cannot build up muscle. My father, who's 82, has built up a lot of muscle. He goes to the gym twice a week. He runs, he hikes, and he literally is stronger than me. And he says he hasn't felt this good since he was in his 30s. Though he does say that he probably felt like crap when he was 30.
Even then, even if he did feel like crap when he was in his 30s, that's a pretty powerful thought, isn't it? That someone in their 80s can be quite confident in saying, doesn't matter how I felt in my 30s, I'm feeling better in my 80s than my 30s. That's incredible, right? It's not something to be sniffed at. That is something that is not the norm in society. It's not what people expect. People think it's an inevitability that we're going to get slower, more tired, our memory's going to go. And I don't buy that, first of all. I've seen that there are many things we can do to mean that's not an inevitability, but I think you take it even further, and you're showing very clearly that does not have to happen to everyone.
It's exactly right. I'm not going to say my father and I are a clinical trial. In fact, we were just doing this mainly because we're scientists. We can read the literature, we're researching it. But it's a fun experiment, right? We've now been doing this long enough that something weird is going on. My dad feels like and acts like he's 30, and I don't act, or hopefully you can judge, look like I'm 52. He's 82. So that's pretty interesting. We'll see over the next 10, 20 years what happens. But he's not a special person when it comes to life. He's an average guy. He didn't like exercise. He was not looking forward to the future. He's not obsessed with his health at all. And look at what happened. He's living a life that he didn't expect at all. And we're already planning going to Africa after COVID. He's looking at life over the next 30 years. I mean, what 80-year-old does that?
An 80-year-old whose son is David Sinclair, that's who.
Maybe.
You mentioned, there's this theme, isn't there, always about this hormetic stress, this pulsed stress on the body that you can then recover from. I can see how interval training does that. What about other forms of training? Now, as we have this conversation, I am 2.5 weeks away from doing my very first marathon. So I'm going to be running the London Marathon in 2.5 weeks. When this conversation comes out, hopefully I will have completed it. I am not doing this for longevity, to be really clear. I'm doing it for other reasons. It was a challenge that was set to me. I'm enjoying the process of seeing if I can do it. But it's an interesting question since I have you on. Clearly running a marathon, and I'm not typically I've not been an endurance type guy, so I've not done lots of stuff like this at all. This is well outside my comfort zone. Could this be a stressor on my body that has a powerful effect when it comes to what my body then does with respect to thinking it needs to hunker down? Of course, it's going to be highly individual based, or could it be that it's too much of a stress. You've gone past that hormetic sweet spot, and it's gone into the realm of actually, depending on my fitness levels and how it fits into the rest of my life, that it can actually become problematic.
I'm not worried about you. If you look at marathon runners, there's a very clear correlation with longevity. People who bike or run long distances do live longer. In fact, in the case of cycling, if you do, I think it was 80 miles a week, your risk of heart attack goes down 60%, a massive amount. I don't know about marathons, but I think that you'll be fine based on all the evidence.
Yeah. So, and then you mentioned we've not spoken really in detail about NMN yet, and I would like to, but you did mention when the mice took it, their endurance got better, and that sort of rung a kind of, that really rung in my brain when you said it, because I thought, oh, I'm doing a marathon in a few weeks. As well as its anti-aging ability, does it also, in your experience beyond that trial, have an ability to improve and increase our endurance levels?
Well, we don't know in humans yet. There's been very few studies with NMN and endurance. In fact, I'm struggling to think of one. Now, we're doing it myself over at Harvard, and we'll know probably early next year if this is true. But I do have an anecdote. One of my now good friends, Ken Rideout is his name. He was a middle-of-the-road marathon runner, kind of doing it as a hobby. And I met him a few years ago. And he decided to make it his mission to see if he could use my science to improve. And every few months, he got faster and faster and faster. And he's now 50 years old, and he's the world champion for his age, and often just beats the 30-year-old in marathons. Myrtle Beach was the most recent. He will be in the same marathon as you. So look out for Ken Rideout. If he wins this race, he's the official world fastest 50-year-old in marathons.
Oh, wow.
And he's on NMN and resveratrol mainly. And, we don't have a twin as a negative control, which is what we should have. And it should be placebo controlled. But absent that, it's pretty interesting what we've seen happen to him.
So let's go into these supplements. We have, of course, we've covered food and exercise and how we can manipulate them to increase our longevity. I do want to talk about cold exposure later on. But you've mentioned a few times that there are certain supplements that you take and other people are taking. So I wonder if we could go through them sequentially and just sort of figure out what they are. I know you've got to be careful in terms of what you are recommending or not recommending, but what does the science so far suggest from what you've seen?
Well, it's a long conversation, and I work with clients on this because it has to be tailored to people's blood work and age and that kind of thing. But in general, what I do is listed on page 304 of my book. So that's the cheat sheet of lifespan. But they fall into buckets. One is the plant polyphenol cocktail, resveratrol, quercetin, fisetin. I mix that in the morning. This morning I had yogurt with it mixed in.
So you don't take them as like a capsule. You wouldn't just swallow it as a capsule. You want the powder mixed into something like olive oil so that it's absorbed better.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then there's NMN, which I take a gram of every morning, which is water soluble. I just swallow that down. And then I take metformin at night, probably every other day. And those are the main things. There's plenty of other things that work for me, I believe. But that's a good start. And I would start, I'm not recommending anything, of course, I'm not a doctor, but if I was to do it, I would start slowly. I would change just one or two things at a time. And I would measure baseline before and after to see how you're doing. Because again, you don't know what's happening unless you measure it. You can do Inside Tracker. I think, I'm not sure in the UK what the equivalent is, but you can do Inside Tracker from the UK. They let you upload your data for a small fee. And that would allow you to see if something's going wrong or going right. But also, you can also show that data to your doctor. I would recommend working closely with your doctor if you're starting to take some of this stuff, even if they're just supplements. I'm also working on trying to figure out how to approve or at least give education about which supplements work, don't work, might work, which ones are pure, which ones are filled with toxins. This kind of thing needs to happen in the industry, because every day I get asked by dozens of people, tell me a brand that I can trust. And I literally cannot, because how would I know? I'm not a nutraceutical guy. I'm a scientist who works in a lab.